They told you that your soul chose this life, that before you were born, you existed in some higher realm, calmly and lovingly planning every detail, your parents, your relationships, your challenges, even the exact moment you die. They said you picked your trauma, your losses, your heartbreaks, because each one was part of a sacred lesson, that you came here to grow, to evolve, to awaken, that everything you've suffered was something you wanted. But what if that's the biggest lie in modern spirituality? What if you didn't choose any of it? What if your soul didn't sit in some divine council meeting sketching out your future, but was pulled into this life, dragged forward by something you couldn't control? What if reincarnation isn't some cosmic journey of love and growth, but a system, a mechanism, a loop? They told you karma is your teacher, but they didn't tell you it's also your prison warden. They said you're free, that you have free will, but they never explained how you can be free when you can't even say no. What if the real reason you're here is because you couldn't leave? And what if that's been the truth all along? You weren't floating in some blissful realm, hand-picking the life you wanted like it was a spiritual vacation. You weren't designing your pain with love. You were being pulled by something far older, far colder, and far more precise than choice. Karma. Not the feel-good Instagram version of karma. The real thing. The law of reaction. The law that binds you to consequences. It doesn't ask what you want. It doesn't care how evolved you think you are. It just calculates. It tallies. It drags. Before birth, your soul was not consulting guides about how to grow through suffering. It was answering to a weight it could not shake. You weren't picking a path. You were defaulting to one. A vibrational match to your unresolved past. And that past, it didn't dissolve when you died. It followed you, because karma doesn't reset when you leave the body. It waits, and when the time is right, it anchors you to the next incarnation, the next life, the next identity, the next illusion. This isn't choice, this is gravity. The soul doesn't drop into a new body out of curiosity. It crashes into it because it couldn't rise above the momentum it was still carrying. And that's not destiny, that's programming. They say Earth is a school, that you're here to learn, to grow, to elevate your consciousness through experience. They say your pain is a teacher, your struggles are lessons, and everything you endure has meaning because your soul chose this path to evolve. But if this is a school, why does no one remember enrolling? Why is it that you enter this life through amnesia, blind to what you're supposed to learn, unsure of what you're even doing here, yet still held accountable for lessons you didn't know you were supposed to pass? That's not education. That's a setup. The truth is, most people don't grow. They repeat. They suffer the same patterns. They attract the same pain. They chase the same illusions. And they come back again, and again, and again. If Earth is a school, it's one most souls never graduate from, because it was never designed to teach. It was designed to trap. This life isn't some personalized growth experience. It's a karmic consequence, a continuation of what hasn't been resolved. You're not here because your soul wanted to explore. You're here because it couldn't let go. And what you call experience is often just the echo of the same old attachments, playing out in slightly different forms. This isn't some sacred journey of expansion. It's spiritual inertia. And until you see that, you'll keep calling it learning, when really, it's just looping. They tell you karma is your guide, that it's here to help you evolve, to gently nudge you toward becoming a better version of yourself. They say it balances, it teaches, it lovingly returns what you send out so you can grow. But karma doesn't love you. Karma doesn't care. Karma is not a conscious being. It's a system, a mechanism, a law. And like any law, it doesn't judge. It just responds, cause and effect, action and reaction. What you send out returns, not as a moral lesson, but as a vibrational echo. It doesn't matter if you're aware. It doesn't matter if you're sorry. It doesn't matter if you're trying your best. Karma isn't keeping score the way you think it is. It's simply executing patterns, repeating outcomes, reinforcing cycles. And here's the contradiction they don't want to talk about. You can't have karma and free will, not at the same time. If karma is real, if you're born with debts to pay, tendencies to repeat, consequences you didn't consciously choose, then how can you say you're free? You don't get to claim spiritual sovereignty while being shackled to unresolved energy from lifetimes you don't even remember. That's not free will. That's compulsion. It's one thing to learn from a mistake. It's another to be born into a life you didn't choose, forced to live out the effects of something you can't even recall. That's not guidance. That's bondage. And the more you resist it, the tighter it holds. This isn't some mystical teacher with a loving smile. This is a closed system, indifferent to your feelings, unconcerned with your intentions, until you find the one way to shut it down. And that way has nothing to do with learning more lessons. You've probably heard it before, that you chose your parents before you were born, that your soul picked your childhood, your body, your culture, even the worst things that ever happened to you, all as part of some higher plan. It's a comforting idea, because if you chose it, maybe it means there's meaning in it. Maybe the pain was worth something. But let's be honest, if you had actually remembered that plan, would you have agreed to it? Would you have chosen betrayal, abandonment, abuse? Would you have willingly stepped into the very circumstances that broke you? Or is it more likely that you didn't choose at all, that you simply landed where your karma pulled you? Because that's what actually happens. Your soul doesn't float into this life with a vision board. It arrives tethered to unresolved patterns, unfinished business, unlearned reactions, unprocessed wounds, and it incarnates into whatever context reflects those frequencies. You weren't placed with your family because they're your greatest teachers. You were placed there because something in your energy matched something in theirs. Because you had karma to burn, and they were the flame. You didn't choose your trauma. You attracted it unconsciously, because that's how karma works. And telling people they chose their suffering doesn't make them empowered. It makes them compliant. It teaches them to accept cycles, not break them. To spiritualize pain instead of transcend it. To call bondage sacred. And keep reliving it under the illusion that it's part of the plan. But there is no plan. There's just momentum. And until you see it for what it is, it will keep pulling you back. Again and again. They say reincarnation is the soul's path of evolution. That you start low, as a stone, an animal, a primitive being, and rise through the ranks until you become human. That every lifetime is a level, and every struggle a step forward. And in the early stages, maybe that's true. Maybe reincarnation is evolution until you reach human consciousness. But after that, something changes. You're no longer climbing, you're circling, because humans don't reincarnate to evolve. Humans reincarnate because they're still trapped. You'd think reaching the human level would be the end of the journey, but instead, it becomes the beginning of a new prison, one made not of instinct and survival, but of desire, attachment, identity, ego. And this time, the trap is harder to see, because it feels like choice. You think you're making decisions, you think you're growing. But most people aren't evolving. They're repeating, playing out the same emotions, same patterns, same stories, lifetime after lifetime. The wheel keeps spinning, not because you're ascending, but because you're still reacting. And reaction is fuel for karma. So you're born, you forget, you suffer, you crave, you chase, you die, you come back. And it all begins again. This isn't evolution. This is inertia. Real evolution isn't about accumulating lifetimes. it's about ending them. And you don't do that by mastering the game. You do it by stepping off the board. Here's the truth they rarely talk about. You can escape, but not by learning your lesson, not by manifesting better outcomes, or calling your pain a blessing in disguise, and certainly not by trying to balance your karma like it's some cosmic to-do list. You escape by ending it. And to do that, you have to stop generating it. Karma lives in movement, in desire, in fear, in emotional charge. It feeds on reaction. It loops through every craving, every aversion, every identity you cling to. And here's the twist. Both ends of the spectrum feed the wheel. Obsessive desire and deep despair. Both bind you. Euphoric happiness and crushing grief. Both are attachments. Two sides of the same karmic coin, and both keep you coming back. The answer isn't to feel nothing. It's to be still. Not flat, not numb, just steady. The natural state of a being isn't endless joy or constant pain. It's calm, mostly quiet, a balanced 5, with occasional spikes of happiness, maybe a 10, and rare, passing dips into despair, but nothing that owns you. That's not emotional suppression. That's spiritual maturity. You don't clear karma by chasing bliss. You clear it by stepping out of reactivity, by not clinging to joy, by not resisting pain, by watching without grabbing. And then, when the mind is still enough, when your identity softens and your reactions quiet, you turn inward. You turn toward the source, not a concept, not a religion, but the ever-present force that made everything and still moves through everything. The one reality that exists beyond karma, beyond illusion, beyond even the soul's forgetting. Call it God, call it the infinite, call it what you want. But in silence, in stillness, in deep meditation, ask it. Ask this force to direct its light, its intelligence, its cleansing power into your body, into your field, into your karmic debris. Not to soothe it, not to heal around it, but to incinerate it. Burn it down to ash, so completely that nothing of it remains. No echo, no imprint, no weight to return to. Not once, not for 5 minutes, but consistently, patiently, devotedly. This is real work, the kind of work that takes months, years, lifetimes for some. And that's why so few succeed. Not because it's hidden, but because most people will do anything to avoid sitting in that kind of stillness. They want shortcuts. They want healing without surrender, awakening without silence, freedom without discipline. But that's not how it works. Because karma doesn't clear through understanding. It clears through transformation. And when it's gone, really gone, there's nothing left pulling you back. And that is when the wheel finally stops. Most people don't break free. Not because they can't, but because they don't realize they're trapped. They spend lifetimes chasing success, love, status, spiritual highs, calling it purpose, calling it growth. But it's still reaction, still karma, still movement inside the wheel. They're born, they forget, they suffer, they strive, they die, and they come back again and again and again. Not because they chose to, but because they never stopped long enough to see they could choose. This isn't about religion. This isn't about being good or bad, enlightened or not. This is about stillness, about whether you can sit, truly sit, with yourself, without distraction, without stimulation, without needing the next thing. And then, from that stillness, surrender. Surrender the false self, the noise, the stories, the karmic tangle you've carried through countless lives, and invite the force that made you to burn it clean. Not once, not quickly, but as a way of life. That's the real work. And it's not glamorous, it's not exciting, It won't impress your friends or give you viral moments, but it will give you something else. Freedom. The kind of freedom that doesn't need to come back. The kind that ends the cycle. So the question is no longer, why are you here? The real question is, are you going to stay? Because this might be your chance. Not your chance to learn. Your chance to leave. If this message reached you, it wasn't by accident. It's one thread from a larger archive. There are others. Signals buried beneath the noise. Messages meant for those who are ready to remember. Not to consume, but to awaken. If you're still listening, already felt the difference. Follow the trail. There's more waiting.